Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Stiglr for the Details. My name is Alan Dickerson, known in some wargaming circles as Stiglr, and we're here to continue our exploration of Donau Front. So, where we are now is the start of game turn 3, and we can see, revisiting our map here, that the Warsaw Pact has had some modicum of success in eradicating the armored cavalry screen and starting to surge west. The Germans, the West Germans, have begun to solidify something of a line of defense that is starting to look a lot stronger in the area that is just behind the NATO tactical victory line for one of the four objectives in this scenario. The Warsaw Marginal Pact victory advance line is about here. So we're about 10 miles, 15, 16 kilometers short of that right now. Now, the other important things to note as we begin turn 3 are that this is the first turn in which we will, before we do anything else, roll to see which side enjoys air superiority. Up till now, the Warsaw Pact has had automatic air superiority for only the first 2 turns, and now there's a chance that that will go away. And if it does, that is going to have a huge effect on whether or not they will continue to move forward in some subtle and not so subtle ways. If the NATO air forces wrest air superiority from the Warsaw Pact, they will be able to deliver attacks or add points to attacks in the form of their air points. And let's have a look at how many air points they would enjoy if they win. Here we are. Okay, well, we don't have anything noted here, so we're going to have to look at the scenario to be able to tell what they get. Okay, air power and chemicals is on page 12. So let's pop down here and see about page 12. Okay, off-map operations, Warsaw Pact. What about the air points? Where do we find out where NATO air points are going to be? I do know that they tend to get more air points than the Warsaw Pact does. Maybe it's on the deployment lists. These are just units. They don't detail anything for air. So Pact. My goodness. Reinforcements. Here it is. When the NATO player has air superiority, he receives 18 air points per map. So yes, they indeed get a sixth more than the Warsaw Pact get when they enjoy air superiority. Other things to note, that on this third turn, the effectiveness of chemicals is all but wiped out and only gives the Warsaw Pact player one column to the right in support of their attacks. So that also is going to slow things down quite a bit. The final thing that really is going to start to come into play is that in creating this initial defensive line, we're starting to see more and more West German artillery units that are appearing behind the lines, and these are going to be able to support any units on the front line that are attacked, unless the Warsaw Pact is able to effectively use their electronic warfare capabilities, which basically is a 50-50 die roll to disrupt communications. 1 through 3, it works. 4 through 6, it doesn't. And this, of course, is after the Warsaw Pact player has declared which units are going to attack. Then the NATO player has the opportunity to devote artillery support to those units, which can be counteracted by electronic warfare if successful. So this is going to be really, really interesting to see what happens here, because this is the first time when NATO seems to have formed a fairly solid line of troops here, albeit a lot of them are either in the open or are in clear terrain, not the most favorable terrain like Regensburg here or the Pernholz suburbs here. Farther back here, there's a lot of more favorable terrain, but the farther south you go into this Bavarian plain here, that's going to be a little bit harder to defend. Also, I will note that I've been kind of taking some notes on this vassal module as I've been playing, and I have made a couple of changes to the module. One of them is I did a little bit of touch-up work on the seam between the Hofgap map here and the Donau front map here. The seam is about here, and now it's a lot harder to tell between the two maps, where before I made those touch-ups it was very, very clear and evident, like here, where you can see the differences between the shades of gray for the map border. You can see the difference between the yellow seaming roads here and the more gold seaming roads here, and a little more here in the dark brown rough terrain. But I've managed to do a bit of color correcting there, and it looks a lot better, at least to my eyes. The third thing that I did was to create this Deadpool display. And I was noting that our mounting German casualties up here are starting to get in the way, and they're going to need to be kind of counted for victory conditions later on. And the or previous to this, you could always click on a counter and delete it, but that just takes it off the map. Of course, you can always get another one from the pieces drawer here, but the idea is that they need to not be deleted, but to go to a place where they can be counted. So now, if I select all of these, and let's see, first let's do a refresh counters. And now if I select all of these and right-click them, we have an eliminate right-click to go along with the delete command that was there. And when I eliminate them, they go into the Warsaw Pact space here on the display. And I believe we had one Warsaw Pact unit way down here at the bottom, which if we eliminate, it goes to the center of the Warsaw Pact half. So get rid of the moved. Just a couple of added wrinkles I'm adding to try and make this module even better going forward. Okay, so that brings us to our next subject, and that is the specter of nuclear warfare. This series has a optional set of rules for the employment of mostly tactical nukes. There are a couple real big ones that you might think might be even larger than that. But of course, these are unbalancing. But I found from playing some of the other games further north that the Warsaw Pact player is going to run out of steam sooner rather than later, and will need to resort to nuclear warfare to break up any well-formed concentration in order to really have a chance to achieve whatever objectives are on that particular map. Where we are now seems to be one of those points where it's going to be really easy to see, even before we roll for air supremacy, that units like this, with their 4 and 5 defensive values, even in the open, they're not going anywhere anytime soon, even against these big Soviet regiments with 10, 11 through 14 strengths. If you took this unit here with a 14 strength and just hypothesized hitting a unit that was in an open hex without even a town to stop a mobile assault, 14 against 2 is only about 7-1 to start. And as we've seen, 7-1, even in the flat, well, it's starting to get into the far right columns, which you really need to get the explosive retreats and results that you want. But after that, you're going to need a lot of things that you don't have anymore, such as the effectiveness of chemicals, air points, helicopter units, those sort of things to kind of shove combats farther to the right. And that's to say nothing of the backup that NATO will start to get from artillery units supporting. The Warsaw Pact can use counter battery fire to try and add extra friction points to those supporting artillery units, but again, they're also going to have to be supporting the attacks too. So that's going to really start chewing into the ammo for the Warsaw Pact artillery units, up to and probably including decision points where Warsaw Pact is going to have to start to think about sacrificing or burning up artillery units to achieve, some tactical greater good. Those are decisions that are going to have to be made coming up pretty quickly now. So, more about nukes. I read up on the rules, and I was operating originally under the assumption that the Warsaw Pact player had to be the first player to resort to nuclear warfare, but I was wrong. Either player can do that. Now, the catch with that is that when you look at the number of devices that you have available, there are about 60 or 70 total devices in various strengths, and some of them are really quite weak, where you basically get a specific table attack, such as, say, the E column or the G column, depending on whether you're a hard or soft unit, and you just roll on it and see if the defender takes any friction points, and that's what the unit will get. So for each of these types, there are a certain number, and they're broken up, divided onto each map. There are a couple that are really, really nasty, such as J column attacks. There are 2 of them here for Donau front, 12 attacks. And the defensive ratio is basically, if you're soft, it's whatever the strength of the nuke is to 1. If you're a hard unit, it's to 2. So in the case of this 50 kiloton unit, if NATO dropped one of those on a hard unit, it would be 12 to 1. On a soft unit, it would be 12 to 2 or 6 to 1. And that's the column that you would roll on. The wrinkle about who goes first is complicated by restrictions for the maximum number of weapons that the Warsaw Pact can use per nuclear segment. And look at this. The first time that they use them, they get a whopping 33 devices that they can deploy. And it's like air points, it's a use them or lose them type of proposition. Then for the next 6 nuclear phases or turns, basically, they can use 6. And then for any remaining turns, they have 3. So it really behooves the Warsaw Pact player to save his first use of nukes for the first time that he uses them. Now, that's not to say that if the NATO player uses nukes, the Warsaw Pact player has to use 33 in that same phase. It means that the first turn that they do use them, they use 33, and then 6, and then 3. So you would figure that the Warsaw Pact player would probably want to wait until the turn comes where they can actually make use of 33 different attacks using all these variety of weapons on NATO units. So you wouldn't want to use this, say, in the first turn when the balloon goes up, because what have you got? You got like maybe 10 weak air cavalry or armored cavalry units on the frontier and only a couple of units in the back, and you've also got the preemptive strike, why would you use it then? So it would seem to be you would kind of wait until maybe that first line appeared, or maybe even wait until late in the game when you could, say, use a whole bunch of these in a very, very concentrated area and then just like drive for objective hexes, road junctures, that sort of thing. So the NATO player doesn't have any limitations as to how many of his devices he can use at any time, but he knows that if he starts the nuclear option, that first phase that the Warsaw Pact player uses it is really going to be a doozy. Okay. Well, I'm not sure if I'm really, really ready to go forward with this, but I'm at least going to make some die rolls and set up turn 3 and figure out exactly what is what and what's going on. And before I do that, let me get my Adobe documents together, and let's see here. Okay, so if we are now on turn 3, the first thing that we do is the friction point removal segment. And for that, we first have to identify any units that are out of supply, such as this unit, and set them up with their little blue border so that they will not be able to get any friction points back. I don't believe there are any Warsaw Pact units that are out of supply. They can all trace back. And they are also within the first 4 game turns in which they get automatic supply anyway. These units are cut off. These units are not cut off. And the determination for that is to spend up to 6 operations points in movement to a road that ultimately goes off of the friendly map edge. So this unit here can rather easily use the freeway to get here, 2, 3, 4, 5, then get to this freeway, which goes to Nuremberg, or also traces. Well, let's check that out. I'm not exactly sure if this northern. Yeah, I believe these are friendly hexes, but perhaps I should check that and make sure. Supply. Where are we? Supply, line of supply is on page 8. And line of supply, 6 operations points on non-friction side, which is during the initial player phase, to a rotor Autobahn, which would, let's see. The second segment is composed of a path of connected road and Autobahn hexes leading from the last hex of the first segment to a friendly supply source. Okay, so where's NATO's supply source? Lead off map. NATO. Donau front is west edge only, okay? And it says road, so that doesn't mean access. So these units may actually be out of supply, but this road, no, this road only leads to the northern hex or the northern edge. They have to trace to a road going to the west. So let's have a look at this. Yeah, Regensburg is starting to loom large. Right. So these units are in fact cut off because, let's see, can they get out? No, they can't get out this way. So yes, these units are in fact out of supply. This militia unit doesn't matter. They're in their town, and that's all they can do. Now, will this Soviet unit here be judged to be out of supply? Because these units do exert a zone of control outside of a city, provided those aren't additional city hexes. So, by the same token, this unit will be out of supply. Let's see, 6 operations points. That would be 2 to cross. Wait, no, this is a access hex side. So 1, 2. Let's see, artillery units. Do they exert a zone of control by themselves? I believe they do. Let's look at zone of control. Friction point zones of control, page 5. 5. Zones of control. Okay. Exception: artillery units, attack helicopters, and engineer units never exert a zone of control. That's an important distinction because now, let's see, this unit could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to cross the river amphibiously and get to 6, get to this hex. Neither of these units exerted a zone of control, so then it could go into this hex. The bridge is not blown coming from this direction, is it? Let's see. Nope, it's only to the west and the southwest, so then it could trace. So this unit is, in fact, in supply. Okay, those are the only adversely impacted units on the map. So we will now go to the friction point removal segment. We've already tested this, and we know that it does calculate everything properly, and boom. All the units are now flipped over to their non-friction point side, except for the isolated units. And that's it. There's our friction point removal segment. And now we move to, got to make sure we do this in order, air power. So now we find out who has air superiority, and this is going to be a very, very important role. So let's get our air power track, and it hasn't mattered for now, so we haven't had the air superiority marker needed. Let's see, other markers. Where is the air superiority table? Air power. Air power was turn 3. it doesn't go there. Let's see. Well, anyway, we're using this raw table, which is basically 1 through 3 is Warsaw Pact, 4, 5, and 6 are NATO, and then there's a possibility of ground fog for an AM turn, and this is a morning turn. So let's roll our die and see what we get for air superiority. And we get a 1. So we still have Warsaw Pact superiority, which is good for them. So they're going to, again, have 12 air points. There's the initial supremacy turn remaining, which is 0, but now they have 12 for this turn. It also means that should the Warsaw Pact start using nukes, there are 8 air-delivered nukes, including some of the ones with the highest strengths of 15, and they will get some really nasty effects. Okay, now after that, now comes the nuclear attack segment. One other thing that I neglected to mention is that the use of nukes is very asymmetrical in this game, and for some relatively good reasons. The Warsaw Pact player, when they decide to use nukes, they basically wait until the nuclear segment of the turn, and then they start selecting units here to use. And there are statements here that tell you what sorts of units can use the corresponding devices. So they can basically either deliver them by air if they have air superiority, or find, say, non-divisional artillery units to deliver these 100 kiloton weapons. Then there are other divisional artillery units, or DAGs, can use these 11 to 1 or 6.5 to 1 units. So after they figure that out, then they just have to go and find either rocket units, or where are some straight artillery units here. This is a DAG, or a DAG, divisional artillery group. And then they basically trace the range that's stated on the table to a target hex. And that's it. They can use them anywhere on the map that they choose, including cities. So obviously this is not friendly territory, so they have no compunction. The NATO player obviously can't be tossing nukes around in West Germany with reckless abandon. So they are restricted as follows. 1, they cannot use them on any city hex, although they can use them on the town hexes. The other thing is that they have to plot the use of their nukes a turn in advance. So basically, if the first time that they want to use nukes, they would have to plot it the turn before. And then once that turn's nuclear phase arrives, they would say, I plotted the use of some nukes. And then they would have to see whether the target hex was viable or not. And by that, I mean you can't target a nuke to be discharged adjacent to an enemy or to a friendly unit. So you can't have moved your own forces too close for quote-unquote safety reasons to use nukes. And Also, if you plotted a aerially delivered nuke for use in a turn, if the Warsaw Pact player has air superiority determined in that phase, then the attack is scrubbed. And also, the use of that particular device is still expended. It's just that you don't actually deliver it. So the only thing that makes it better is that the NATO player can designate a specific unit on the map as the target. And then, as long as that unit hasn't moved adjacent to a NATO unit, then they'll be able to expend whatever device they plotted against it. So it's really, really difficult for the NATO player to make best tactical use of their nukes. They can basically use them for area disruption. They could say, if they figure they're going to lose, they know they're going to lose Regensburg this turn, they could vacate the city in the previous turn and then just plot along a freeway where they figure there's going to be a nice motorcade of Warsaw Pact units along that road. But it's really going to be difficult for them to figure that out. And also, if they start moving units in such a way that the Warsaw Pact player kind of looks at that and goes, you know what? It seems like they would occupy, say, this particular line, say here, and yet they stop short of it. That's interesting. Well, I won't move any units there to start. You can get into a little mini cat and mouse game. Okay, let's also look at reinforcements that are due for this phase before we make our decision on the Warsaw Pact player employing any nukes. The NATO player can't because they would have had to have plotted those last turn. All right, let's look at the reinforcement. So the Warsaw Pact player on game turn 3 only gets, for the Donau front map, the 22nd Guards tank division, and those are at the 3 railheads to the far east, and it costs 2 operation points to detrain those units and jump off. So let's move them there and put them there. Grab a note. Let's see, note. Whoops. Oh. I have to use these things. Got to figure out how these things are designed. And this is to train at a railhead. And we'll put that there. And again, the railheads are here. There's one here. And another one here. So those are the 3 railheads that they can deploy from. Now let's look at what NATO has coming on. And these will probably be coming in from this area. And NATO reinforcement track for turn 3. They get lots for Donau front. They get these at 2801, or 28 is here. This is the 10th Panzer Division, more troops. 24th Panzer Brigade of the 1st Germans are at 1601, so these are a little further to the south here. Another Panzer Grenadier over here with 9 operations points here. Let's start, might as well start setting these out. Okay, these are 2801 and (9) OP. Start with, let's put those there. These are at 1601 with 8 operations points. We'll put those there. Notes. 8 OP. There. It's another brigade here. 29th Panzer Grenadier with 9. They're also here. This 29th Panzer Grenadier more with only 7. So we'll put them there. (7) OP here. And more French units that all come in here with 9, 8, and 11 respectively in operations points. And they have 9 operations points, so we'll put those there. And then these 3 have 8 operations points. Put those here, and a note. That was 8. 8 OP here. Put that there. Okay. All right. Well, I'm thinking that it would probably behoove the Warsaw Pact player to wait at least one more turn so that they have the more targets, basically, and maybe use this as more of a consolidation turn more than anything else. Maybe they'll try to eliminate this pocket and this pocket this turn, and failing that, bring up more of these reinforcements here and further south along the plain and set up for the next phase of the battle. So we're going to say that the Warsaw Pact player is not going to make use of the nuclear attack segment. Let's see whether, I just have to think that the NATO player would always wait until the Soviet player uses nukes first, because that, they can't really control whether the 33 points come down on them or the 33 devices come down on them at any time, but they certainly don't want to bring it on by being the first to start it. I believe in earlier iterations of the rules, the Warsaw Pact player did have to be the first player to use nukes, but maybe that was changed during the rules consolidation process. Not exactly sure of that, but That's kind of the way I see it. All right, so we are then at the initial phase of operations for the Warsaw Pact player who goes first. So let's see what we're going to do. I think we will start bringing up the reinforcements because there aren't a lot of roadblocks in the way. And maybe we should look at seeing if we can reduce these pockets. Oof. They're really not going to be able to do much there. Both of those units, the engineers and the Volksbeteiligungs's unit there need 5 steps each to be eliminated. So 4 gets them to the brink, and then the 5th eliminates them. The engineers have 2 against them. The militia unit is untouched. So that one would need 5. The engineers would need 3. That's 8. That's going to be really, really difficult to score against a city hex. 8 steps would require at least 2 attacks on the farthest reaches of the city CRT. And yeah, you would need to roll 1s or 2s with prepared assaults to be able to have any chance to reduce that unit that much. But that said, they've got to start the process at some time. So, and then, of course, they're also going to have to invoke some successful electronic warfare to keep this artillery unit from intervening, or they could shut it up by moving a unit adjacent to it, which would forestall it from doing anything else but aiding in its own self-defense. This is going to be difficult. The Czechs are really not going to be able to do much against this unit. Yeah, they've each got, well, they do have an engineer forward to help against the city. Let's see what that entails. City defending. In a city hex, and the attacking units include an engineer, it means you use the rough or marsh row. So that's tantamount to 3 or 2 columns. Yep, this would be 8, this would be 6. So that's a 2-column shift because they have the engineers there. So that's that bodes well. Might have to think about how to best carry that off, but man, their strength. Those rockets have a strength of 5. No, that's the range. They have a strength of 2. Defense is 6. That is quite a bit. In the attack, we have 8, 17. Then we could draw from artillery 17 and 7 would be 24. It's out of range. So they can mass a total of only 24 points against 6. So that's only 4-1. Let's have a look. 4-1 on the marsh broken woods table starts us on E. So we have two chances of only taking a friction point for the attacker and nothing for the defender. The defender would lose at worst 2 friction points if we roll a 1 in a prepared attack. Otherwise, they'll only lose 1. And also remember that check losses are doubled unless there is Soviet or no. Yeah, their losses would be doubled irrespective of the result. And they also have the chance that some of these units might lose their vigor and not attack unless at least 1 air point is used for Warsaw Pact cooperation to forestall the reliability issue. That is a thorny proposition. So, do they want to do it or not is the question. We've got more NATO units bearing in here. And although I don't think they're going to be very successful at mounting an attack against these units, I don't know how much ground they're going to make up there. Well, let's see. Yeah. Well, the West German unit is on the brink. Any one will destroy it. And if you have a stack and you take a result, I think you only have to take 1 step loss for the entire stack, or is it per unit? Let's get that clarified right now. Combat resolution, it's all on page 7. Okay. Combat result calling for friction point gain by the attacker is applied to each and every attacking unit. Combat result calling for friction point gain by the defender is applied to each and every defending unit. Okay, that changes the calculus a bit because we know that the armored unit is on the brink. Any one will kill it. Once that unit goes, the defending rocket unit will defend with a strength of 1 instead of 2 because he is a unsupported artillery unit. Okay, that changes the reasoning a little bit and also makes the electronic warfare role really, really critical. Okay. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here and only start this at the beginning of the next episode so that I can have a chance to maybe get through the entire turn in one sitting. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of setup and exploratory stuff in this episode, and I don't want it to get too long. So I think I'm going to pause here, and I'm also going to note that I did not start a log file. So I'm going to start a log file. I'm going to call it turn 3. Call it 2. I'm going to save that as the log, and I'm just going to note what we determined here. So turn 3, Warsaw Pact retains air superiority, no ground fog, no use of nuclear weapons. Ready for start of the Warsaw Pact first operations phase. And then I will end that log file. Then also I will save the game as a save. And this time use the vsave suffix, so it's a game state and not a log. And we'll save it. Start Warsaw Pacts initial ops phase. A note there, and there we go. All right. So the next time we're going to start off with this critical combat here, and then following then maybe this one, and see how it goes from there. Until next time, I've been Alan or Stiglr, and you've been watching Stiglr for the Details, and we will see you next time.